They're a lot better since January, right? So Nancy, you may not know, actually does the coordination of the hymns that we sing at the 11:15 service. It's a very big job, and she's done a great job of including choir members to help with that. It's just going super well, and I am very grateful to all the work that she puts in. You wouldn't know it if I didn't tell you. And so this is a very important thing, a very important service that she provides. So I just want to start by saying thank you.
Thank you.
But the wonderful byproduct of that is that I've gotten to know you a little bit better,
Yes.
and I'm a fan, y'all. I just admire Nancy so much, so I'm really excited to learn more about her with you. And so we're gonna get started.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with where you grew up and a little bit about your childhood.
So I grew up mostly in New Mexico. My parents are from the South. They're both from Arkansas, but they moved to New Mexico when I was a year old. And we lived in lots of places in New Mexico. I lived in lots of little tiny places. We lived in Raton, TRC, Las Vegas. My dad worked for the Game and Fish Department, and they liked to move people around. And then we lived in Tucumcari for 3 years. Then we moved and lived on the side of the road between Taos and Espanola. Wow. I went to first grade there, and then we moved to Santa Fe. He moved into a job in the state capitol. We were there a couple of years, and then we came to Las Cruces. My dad was a professor at NMSU, so that's how I got to Las Cruces. I have 2 siblings. I have a brother that's 2 years older than I am, and a sister that's 8 years younger. Okay. And I have a very traditional home. My parents stayed married. My mom stayed at home most of the time. Very typical kind of upbringing, I guess.
And you're a middle child.
Middle child.
Yeah. Do you find yourself being the traditional peacemaker?
A lot of times, yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so that's about your family of origin. Tell us a little bit about the family that you have built with Robert.
So Robert and I met in college and got married, and a lot of people tell you very young. I was almost 21, and he was 24. He had served in the military and was back in school. And so we got married here in Las Cruces, and then went on about continuing our education. We lived in Oklahoma for a number of years. We lived in Washington, D.C. area for a year while he did his psychology internship. The Navy saw fit to send us to the desert of California. And along the way, right through there, we had a daughter born in 1984 and another daughter born in 1987. So that's our family as it is. And then he decided to get out of the military, and we started looking for a place to live, and we knew we wanted to be in the Southwest, and we were describing this town. And I came out to interview for a job in Santa Fe, and they had moved the job to Las Cruces. And that's how we ended up back in Las Cruces, so it was by accident. But so we've stayed since then, and we raised both of our daughters here, and we're very proud of them. They're great kids. Our oldest daughter was a valedictorian at NMSU when she graduated, and she stayed. She's in civil engineering, and she works for Bureau of Reclamation, and she works on the water issues of New Mexico, the flow of the water down the Rio Grande River. I don't know if you're aware, there's a big Supreme Court case. She has been a technical advisor. She testified. She got to go sit in the Supreme Court when it was heard. So that's what she does. She's very passionate about that. She has a husband she met in high school, and so they've been married a long time. They have 2 kids. So it's 2 of our grandkids. One of them turned 6 Friday, and the other one's getting ready to be 12. And then our younger daughter is she was a stay-at-home mom until just a few weeks ago. She's married to a college football coach. So they've lived lots of places. They currently live at Fort Collins, Colorado. They've been there a couple of years. And they have a daughter who's 7 and a son who will be 6 in a few days. So
that's great.
That's our little family.
So when you came back to Las Cruces, did it feel like coming home?
No, it didn't. It felt very different because it was coming back in a very different perspective. You know, we came back as now a family and kids and jobs, and so it felt very different.
And the city had changed, I'm sure,
Oh, yes.
in the time
Yes.
that you were gone. Excellent. Okay, and I love to watch Nancy with my own kids because the older two especially are right around the age of your grandkids, and she's so patient and great with them, and that's always really good for my soul. So we're going to talk a little bit more about your professional experience in a moment, but let's not move past the faith background yet. Tell us about your faith background and any experience that you have felt to be formative.
I don't have any big moments that jump out like some people do. I was raised in the Methodist Church. My dad was raised Methodist. My mom was raised Baptist, and so they opted to be Methodist. And so we always went all along. And when I was growing up, part at Las Cruces, we went to University Methodist Church. So I participated in youth group there and everything. And then my parents left the Methodist church, went to the Lutheran church. So I actually got married in the little tiny Lutheran church over on Elks Club.
Nice.
Yeah, so, and then Robert and I, when we moved to Oklahoma, we actually became Presbyterian. And we did that for a few years there. We worked with the youth. We were assistant with the youth. And really, that was my first experience in that kind of a role with kids. And then we went back to Methodist while we were in the military. We went to the generic church of the military. Well, that's kind of what it is. It services everybody. It was a great church, but and then we practiced Methodist since then. We raised our girls in the Methodist church. I went on a mission trip with the youth, with our girls, to the Navajo Nation to do home repairs. I don't know if they're still doing that, but for a long, long time, they went every summer, and that was a great experience to do with our girls. That really was very nice. Then we kind of quit going to church for quite a while, and then when we decided to come back to church, we decided to change churches, and that's how we actually ended up here, even though we live over by the university.
So how did you hear about Morning Star, and I mean, what brought you here, I guess, and what keeps you here? Robert picked to come here, so I can't tell you why he picked it actually, but it took us a long time to find a place here, but I like the beliefs of this church, especially the helping the downtrodden. That's something my whole career has been about, as you'll learn later. So that's what's so very important to me, is that helping people, especially kids, and that's the part of being here that I like the most. Well said. Okay, so let's talk about your own professional experience. You've talked about kind of your dad's experience and then the military in terms of Robert's service, but let's hear about you and your professional experience.
So I kind of had two careers. I have a degree, I have 2 degrees in nutrition, and I registered dietitian, but I never wanted to work at a hospital, ever. I hated that environment. I'm sure all of you can relate to that. So I worked in public health. So when I finished my master's degree in Oklahoma, I went right into public health, and if you're familiar with the WIC program, I worked with that. Did a lot of education of families, parents, evaluating children. So that was kind of my start into my professional career. When we left Oklahoma, I didn't work for a year, then we moved to California, and 29 Palms is about this big, and there's not a lot there, but I got a job with public schools in the nutrition department, feeding the kids. Did that there a couple of years. We moved here. That job I took was back with public health, and so I spent 5 more years working with the WIC program. I supervised most of the southern or the southwestern part of New Mexico's programs, so I got to travel almost every day. And then the food service director's job in Las Cruces here opened, and I took that job, and that's where I stayed. We expanded, we added nutrition components, education in the classroom. We really worked hard to provide something beyond the meals, and that was the most exciting part of that program for me. We fed 25,000 meals every day. Yes, we did that. But we also expanded, we brought in how to have a party without eating junk, how to have exercise parties. We found grants for equipment, lots of really exciting ways to impact the kids in the classroom and making sure everybody had breakfast in the classroom. So we did a lot of things that were beyond just feeding the kids. So that's that side. At the same time, I was in the Navy Reserve. So you've all heard of the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. That was me. And I was in a medical unit that provided Marine support. It's called a Fleet Hospital. It's MASH, Navy's version of MASH. And so I did a lot of training. We learned to put up our own hospital, live in it, cook in it, sleep in it, all those things. We had cold weather training, froze to death. But it brought about some really great experiences the last half of my career. Our unit got involved in humanitarian missions, which involved going into really outlying villages in very poor countries that, of course, there was a political component of countries that were democratic but that needed support to stay that way. So I was involved in missions into Ghana, Africa. We went over 3 times, planned them, and then went back and did a 3-week mission, going from village to village, providing medical services. Then I was involved in the one into Thailand, and then into Ecuador. So lots of interesting things I learned, experiences I had. I would have flew in my first helicopter in Ecuador without permission from anybody above us. That was a little, but probably the saddest event out of all of those experiences and seeing how poor people lived is we were visiting a clinic in Africa, and they had a physician who was well-trained, been to the U.S., got his medical background, and he wanted to show us his clinic. And so we were there, and he opened a door to an exam room, and it was a dirty mattress laying on the floor. That's all that was in there. And on the mattress was this small child, preschool, and we were all just in shock seeing this child laying there. And then he tells us the story. The parents are sitting outside of the room on a bench, the 2 parents and another child, and they had walked multiple miles to the clinic. They had had a child die a few days before that, and this one was laying in there, and we said, well, what does the child need? As it turned out, the child needed an IV bag. That's all the child needed. And in their storeroom, they had none. While we were standing in the room, that little girl died. That was probably the most impactful thing that happened to me in my whole military career. And to see how poor those people lived, we couldn't set down anything, they didn't grab it up and save it to use. Water bottles, we finally had to burn our leftover medicine stuff because they would dig it up when we buried it, because they are so desperate. And it was my first really understanding of how poor other countries and other people live. And that story has carried with me as I think about the world and as you hear about things that are going on and how desperate people are. And it really helped me to understand that. The last part of my military career, I was recalled to Kuwait during Iraqi freedom. I was the XO of the hospital, and we had a hospital and 6 clinics across Kuwait that we provided mainly support for Americans as they went in and out of Iraq. And so I was there for a year as my children were in college and finishing high school. I got to come home and watch my young daughter graduate while I was in Kuwait, so that was the age time frame for my kids.
Wow. those are powerful stories, and we can see how it shapes your priorities here now as well. So let's talk about ways that you are involved in Morning Star. We mentioned the choir a bit, and you can share more about that if you want, but you're also involved in the food pantry and other areas of service as well. So can you talk a little bit about how you serve here?
So that's mostly what we do. I do. Started out at the clothing bank, but then that closed down during the COVID, and it never opened back up. So I moved to the food bank. So anytime we're in town, I like to come and work at the food bank. I just think it's a way to support our families in a way that I think the way we do it's very respectful, and I really like that. That we don't make them feel bad for coming here, and I think that's one of the most important things that we do is we honor them as people and provide them food that they need, and I think it's very valuable that they feel that message from us. And you should come and just watch the ones that hand out and load the cars, and they're just very kind to all of them. The ones that check them in, they're so kind that the customers bring us food that they've baked with things we've given them, and I think that says a lot for the relationship between the two. So for the choir, my husband is in the choir, and when Leslie decided to leave, they were without any leadership, and I can't sing, so I can't do that part, but we need somebody that can organize, and my husband can't organize anymore. He had a stroke almost 7 years ago, and he lost some abilities, including one to organize anything, but he wanted us to play a leadership role. So my job is to work with Amy, get the scriptures, the topics, find the music, copy it, organize it, and give it to the choir. So I do all the administrative part for the choir. We wanted it to make the choir feel more as a group, and so we've been picking music together, which is like herding cats, as you can well imagine. So, and then we change our mind, and it's been an adventure, but I think I see the choir growing with each other, and when they practice now, they'll say, we need to do that part, it doesn't sound good. And so you can see they have this desire to make it better and include, and I just am really excited with the attitude the choir has within them. Today we're going to try a trio for you at the beginning, and we're hope that it goes well. But if you have input about the choir, things you want us to sing, we took that survey, we used a lot of those songs, but if you just, we know you like to do the ones you like, but we like to put in some others. We try to relate them to what Amy's talking about. Sometimes we miss a little, but most of the time we're pretty well on track with her. But to me, music is such an important part of the service. Makes you feel calm sometimes or excited sometimes, but I just think the service would not be the same if we didn't have that. So that's why I've chosen to do that.
It's a huge help, and then Larry Farmer is the one who will lead the congregation, and that so it's a combination of efforts, which is really helpful, and it would not be the same without you. And there is a sense of camaraderie with the choir that's growing, and that's just really fun. I want to make sure you all have time to ask questions. Do you have anything you want to add before we open it up?
No.
Okay, did great.
Well, this is really hard for me. I'm an introverted, shy person, believe it or not. Yeah, so talking about myself is very hard. So.
I was really grateful that she said yes, because I knew it was going to be a great interview. So if you all have questions or comments, please share them, and then I'll repeat them so that our friends online can hear them, and then we'll let you answer them. Steve. Oh, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, beautiful.
It gave much more to me than I gave it, but it was a wonderful experience.
Oh, it's so
Met
beautiful.
Great people.
So beautiful. Carol.
ourselves being asked to do stuff or taught to do things that were not exactly what you learned in school. The reason I ask that is I worked as a clerk in an emergency room, and I ended up doing stuff that I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope you don't get sued. When it's a small emergency room, and,
Yeah.
I just, have to step up and
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, in your service in the Navy, did you ever find yourself doing something a way that you weren't exactly trained for it, but answering the moment, the need in the moment?
I think there's a whole lot of that, no matter what you've trained for. So I never felt like I did anything I didn't feel good about. Never. Things I was nervous about, absolutely. And going through gas mask training and having to get gassed and things that I didn't think I could ever do. Anybody in the military has to go through those. It's not like I was any different. But that were never anything I had pictured myself doing. My first overseas traveling I ever did was when I went to Africa by myself. One of my flights didn't pick me up. I got lost. I was taken to a hole-in-the-wall hotel in the middle of a town. I had no idea what I was doing. All these things that by military rules I shouldn't have done, but I was in a spot I had to, and I learned I could do it. And I found my way. And so it gave me lots of strength that I didn't know I had.
Strength, confidence. Yeah, that's so cool. Sue. Yeah. There's so much we don't know about each other, right? And so we are appreciative.
Thank you.
An endorsement for Nancy and an endorsement for Parables. Thank you.
There was
Sue.
one thing I forgot to talk
Yeah,
about.
please do.
So I do a growth group at our house. We meet every single week that we're in town. And again, I wasn't the one with the religious knowledge, but I can organize anything. Just ask me, I'll organize it for you. So, and that's been a real blessing for us. It's given us a chance to really get to know some people very, very well.
And you choose very interesting topics too.
Oh, yes.
So that's fun. She's organized a growth group. She and Robert host one of our growth groups or small groups
Our small groups.
every week.
So-
Yeah.
And yes, we pick interesting topics, probably ones that make us a little nervous sometimes and really have stretched our knowledge. But I think it's provided us a great opportunity to get very close to some people.
Yes, absolutely. It's another important area of service. Anything else? Any other comments or questions for Nancy? It's such a treat to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give Nancy a round of applause. Yeah, so you did it.
Yes.
With 4 minutes to spare. And next week we will have Matthew Escada with us for Parables.